From the Stream Center in Abilene, Texas, the home of KTAB and KRBC, this is Cross-Examine on BigCountryHomepage.com.
And we are back with Clint Dunn and Erica Morse on the 15th anniversary of Hailey Dunn missing. She was reported missing on December 28th.
7th, 2010.
Okay. So she was reported missing the next day, though, right? On the
You're right. On the
she actually was last seen on the 27th. And having said that, Clint, there was something that you wanted to bring up that you said was part of the puzzle.
Yeah, I think it definitely has significance to solving this, or motive behind it. Me and Shawn had gotten to a fight. I'm thinking it was the same summer of 2010. Okay. And Shawn had came to my mom's house looking for Billie Jean, thinking that I was sleeping with her and thinking that she was there. And she wasn't there, and we went outside, we had a fight. I put him to sleep, and
you're talking a physical fight.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I could go in details and tell you how it all went. He was trying to get a weapon out of his car, and I hemmed him up right there, and we scrapped, and I eventually put him to sleep. The police came, and he got arrested. He had broken his hand trying to hit me, hitting the ground. And so he'd shattered his hand and went to the hospital. And I told the police that I wanted to press charges. And the police were dickheads to me. They were yelling at me, whenever they were there. And I was saying, look, he had a weapon in his car, and y'all have him sitting in the front seat of his car, because he didn't even wake up until the police got there. And the police woke him up, and they were like tending to him. And I'm like, you guys, he has a weapon in his car. I don't know what he has, but he was going to get it. And that's when I stopped him. And so anyways, I put Shawn to sleep, and I always felt like that was a big part of why he did what he did, And that was another thing, the reason why Hailey didn't like him, because, me and him, we had a squabble. We had beef between us. And
And it sounds like they're dismissing you once again, which leads us back to Adam's question. What was that, Adam?
Yeah, that brings a little more context even to what I asked before the break is, police, you say they were trying to get you out of the way as you're trying to find out what happened to your daughter. And then previous to that, they have this fight and they kind of dismiss that. So kind of what do you feel like could have been done differently on the law enforcement aspect?
Or why were they trying to get you out of the way?
And why do you think that they were trying to sideline you during all of this?
I think I could have sued the police for not protecting me, because Shawn had came to my house and started the fight there, and they wouldn't let me press charge. I'm pretty sure nothing was even said about it, because I've had investigators try to find this fight that we got into and see what kind of charges was pressed on Shawn and what happened. And it can't be found. And so the police should have been protecting me, and they should have been protecting Hailey whenever Billie Jean was calling these guys and telling them, Shawn said he's going to do something that everybody remembers. He's going to hurt me and he's going to hurt my daughter. They weren't protecting anybody. They didn't do anything.
It's interesting to me when and why charges were filed during this investigation and when they were not. There's one specific instance, and I think, Victor, if you want to have us get these court documents pulled up, but at some point during the investigation, there were more than 100,000 documents of pornography, including alleged child pornography, alleged bestiality, that were found on electronic devices in the grandmother's home of Shawn Adkins, and also in the house on a hard drive in the house that he shared with Billie Jean. So are you aware of that pornography, and do you happen to have any idea why nobody was ever charged in connection to it?
So, yeah, obviously I know about it. I've asked about it a lot of times. It almost seems like I'm the only one that's asking about it. There's a lot of people that loved Hailey, and why aren't they asking any questions? Why isn't anybody asked the question about, why doesn't anybody get down to the bottom of this child porn?
Well,
Everybody's known about it. All of us has heard about it.
let me
For
play this
15
clip.
years.
Let us play this clip real quick. We'll all listen to it, and then we'll talk about it right afterwards.
Than actually doing.
ARBC obtained affidavits this week authorities used to seize a computer from Adkins' mother's home with more than 108,000 photos and videos of pornographic and deviant acts. Law enforcement also confiscated a memory stick from Billy Dunn's bedroom containing hundreds of pornographic photos and videos.
I hadn't seen any of it.
Dunn said just yesterday she had no idea about any of the pornography.
They're more into it for the pleasure.
So that is
than actually
our story back then when, Erica, you're talking about these porn documents that.
Yeah, and I read them a little more closely, and I think they do allege the child pornography and the bestiality, because I understand if it's just pornography, even if it's deviant involving consensual adults, that wouldn't be a criminal matter. But that wasn't necessarily the pornography in question that they found.
And I believe, Clint, you did allude to some sort of sexual acts or something that was going on earlier. Is this what you were referring to?
The animal pornography is illegal, and the child pornography is illegal.
Yes.
It was all found.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so, all of us has asked why hasn't anything happened about the pornography? Where did it all go? And it wasn't just found. Here's another important thing. It wasn't just found on one device.
Yeah.
It was found on 3 or 4 devices, computers, thumb drives, and so that's what I think is maybe one of the keys to this. And I'm going to let Erica take that away whenever she talks about it later.
Yeah, and we do have a lot of questions for her about you guys and your own investigative efforts. But I will say, as someone who has scrubbed the internet far and wide looking for information on this case, the public is right there with you. One of their main questions regarding this case is about the pornography and why nobody was ever charged. So,
yeah, and why don't we get any answers? I've gotten several answers from them, and the FBI, the last answer that I got from them was they said it was fragmented images. And I'm like, how do you get fragmented images on 4 different devices? And so this is going to be one of the keys, you guys, is this child porn.
and
This is why this case isn't solved yet.
Yeah, and they found something else strange too when they searched Billy and Shawn's bedroom, right? They found a box full of artifacts connected to crimes, or maybe some newspaper
Murders.
clippings or something like that. What was in that box? Do you know?
That was over 100,000 pages of the worst crimes that there are. The Ted Bundy case, just all of your worst cases, from Jack the Ripper to freaking everybody. Jeffrey Dahmer, every single case, just the worst public cases. And it was just documentations of all these cases.
And was Billy interested in that kind of information when you were with her?
No. We watched horror movies. And that was the extent of, anything bad like that stuff. We didn't watch documentaries or anything. We watched horror movies. We watched House of a Thousand Corpses or something.
Sure. I want to jump ahead a little bit, Clint. When Hailey's remains were found, and if we can play clip 17 on that, they were found, at least some of her remains were found at Lake J.B. Thomas, which is not far from Sea City, Colorado City. I'm going to ask you about that day for you. What was that day like for you? Because before that point, did you still hold out some hope, or did you kind of know?
As time went on, the feeling of something really bad happened had gotten stronger and stronger with me. And so after a year passes and years, and then I start looking up these horror cases, and I start studying what's happened here, and I start, looking into the human trafficking and seeing how human beings are being treated worse than an animal, literally being trafficked around this world. And I started, I didn't mind for her to be dead after over a year passed it, because I didn't want her to be,
Sure.
drugged this whole time and a sex slave down in the fucking dungeon or something.
So was it kind of relieving to find out that her remains were found? Did the police just give you a phone
Just in a
call? Did they
sense,
come to your house?
In a sense, it was relieving. In a sense, it was,
Sure.
man, I
have
knew
the
this.
answer.
Everybody
I
can
know,
understand
I
that.
know that was
Yeah.
going to happen.
Mhm.
So it was, all kinds of emotions and feelings. It was, it was a lot more bitter than it was anything sweet.
And it's so close too. Is that like JB Thomas? Did Hailey ever go there? Did you ever go there? Did Shawn?
Yeah, she grew up going to Lake JB Thomas. We camped out there several times a year. We would camp out there for 2 or 3 days.
And in preparing for this, and maybe Erica, your investigator there, she may have some insight on this. If I found that in child abductions, if it was a family member and not a stranger, then the remains or body will be found pretty close to the home. I mean, and Lake JB Thomas is pretty close to Colorado City, right? How far away is that?
At 19 miles, 18 miles.
Erica, do you have Erica Morse, who's been investigating this case along with Clint? Do you have any insight on that, Erica?
In terms of the radius for a child,
Exactly.
I mean, normally the radius is 6 miles. Our training from the FBI guidebooks, Search and Rescue, Laura Recovery Center, NECMEC, the National Center, teaches us to start at the 1 mile. Well, you start at the point where they were last seen, you work your way out to the first mile, second mile, third mile, et cetera, et cetera. Statistically, children, especially children, are found within a 6 mile radius. But in this particular case, we had a man who was driving around that morning all over the county, and that is supported by his cell phone pings and that tower data. So
You're talking about Shawn's whereabouts on that day that Hailey was reported missing.
Start as early
That
as
is-
5:30 a.m. according to this
Yes.
timeline I have here.
that is correct.
So
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was about to say, we can maybe in a second if you had something else to say, but we kind of need to unpack this timeline because it plays, I think, a crucial role in the investigation against Shawn. And unfortunately, I think his ultimate release from jail after his arrest, because he was arrested in 2021, but he was released from jail in 2023. And the timeline, according to the documents I've read, had a lot to do with that.
With the timeline you're talking about, Erica.
Yes.
No, the timeline wasn't the cause for him being released at all, because I created the original timeline that law enforcement worked off of with Clint and I and the other search captains.
Uh-huh.
I created the original timeline for this case that the DA's investigator was using.
You're talking based on
So-
those cell phone pings?
No, we're talking about based on the movements when he left the house that morning.
Yes.
Okay.
Drove down, all of it from the moment he left the house that morning.
Because there is in the motion to dismiss, investigators believe, and this is not anything for certain, they just say that if Shawn were the killer, due to the cell phone ping data, we've determined that there's about a 2-hour window on the 27th from 3 to 5 p.m. that Shawn would have been alone with Hailey and could have committed this crime. And they cite the fact that a little bit before 3 p.m. on the 27th, Shawn made a phone call, and that showed him, I believe, somewhere in between Big Spring and Colorado City, not in Colorado City yet. And then also a little bit before 3 p.m., Hailey's phone, or the phone that Hailey was believed to be using, it was actually Billy's phone, I think, that she allegedly left with Hailey, that phone received a call just before 3 p.m. And investigators are saying, well, if we assume that Hailey's the one who answered the phone, then we can assume that she was alive probably before 3 p.m. There was a sighting of Shawn by Hailey's brother David around 5 p.m. So they have that 2-hour window. Do you have anything to say about that? Because they believe that it might not necessarily be enough time for Shawn to have committed this crime, which would have
Okay.
been very violent.
Ooh, okay. That whole statement, we've got to clarify. There's a lot wrong in what was just said there. First of all, it is presumed by both law enforcement and then Clint and our team that Hailey was most likely deceased between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m. on the morning of the 27th. All of these sightings of Hailey were unverified, and like the hairdresser, she wasn't even open on Mondays. So the hairdresser could not have seen Hailey while she was doing hair on Monday. I followed that up years ago. So that timeline is very specific to when David was told to leave the house, because that's something that isn't discussed enough in this case. David was sent away from the home on Sunday evening between 10 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. for an impromptu sleepover at a friend's house in Scurry County. I believe it was at the Bertrands. Clint can confirm. I believe they were over
No, it's Pitt
because
County.
he had to drive. Mr. Bertrand this was not an around the corner thing. This man had to drive, I believe, about 20 to 30 minutes, pick David up at 10:30 at night, and then drive David home. And then David wasn't home for the next 2 days. So from 10:30 p.m. on Sunday evening, the 26th, until Shawn Adkins left that home that next morning, the only 3 people in that home were Shawn, Hailey, and Billie Jean. And Billie Jean's statement about looking at Hailey and not touching her, we've had statement analysis experts look at that and dissect that, and that has been determined to pretty much be a lie. Everything after midnight, you can presume, is a lie.
This leads me to this soundbite that I want to play with Billy Dunn. The first part, not so much, but listen to the second part of the soundbite, and I just want to play this real quick for all of us to hear, and then we're going to talk about it because it does go, it does speak to what we're talking about right now.
That Hailey hadn't called me, confirmed that Shawn did let me know she was staying the night with her friend.
Billy says she's disappointed with the way law enforcement has handled the investigation.
Here it
I do
is.
not understand why they seem to have disregarded all of the witnesses who have come forward to say they saw Hailey. I also don't understand law enforcement's reluctance to publicly name any other persons of interest. I was kind of upset that Hailey hadn't called me.
I wanted y'all to hear that
Shawn
second
did
part
let
where
me
she
know
says,
she
I
was
don't
staying
understand why they seem to have disregarded all the witnesses who have come forward to say they saw Hailey. And what you're really saying right now, and I guess what Billy is saying right now, is she covering her tracks right there? I mean, is that
Yes.
what's going on?
Yes, she needs law enforcement to listen to those other witnesses. She needs law enforcement to listen to the crackhead across the street. She needs law enforcement to listen to the hairdresser who wasn't open on Monday, who claimed that she saw Hailey while she was doing hair on Monday, on a day that
Meanwhile,
her salon isn't open.
hairdressers usually close down on Mondays.
Yeah, that's
Bingo.
Yeah.
you're right.
And David never said that.
Thank you, Clint.
David never said that he's seen Hailey that day.
Correct. He saw Shawn that day at 3 p.m.
That's when he
At 5
saw-
is the accounts that I've been able to find. And let's talk about that when David comes
No.
home. Allegedly,
David never saw Hailey that day.
not Hailey, Shawn. When David came home, allegedly, I've been seeing between 4 and 5 p.m. on the 27th, he returned home and the house was locked up. He couldn't get inside. So he forced his way inside through a window, and there's where he encountered Shawn alone with a, quote, deer in headlights look. No Hailey to be found. And that was between 4 and 5 p.m. on the 27th.
Hailey was already deceased.
So do you have any idea why? And I keep citing this 3 to 5 p.m. window, but I'm not making this up myself. That is verbatim from the motion to dismiss against Shawn Adkins as to why they dropped his murder charges. Do you have any idea why law enforcement is so focused on this window, then this very small 2-hour window?
No, That's not what the AG's prosecutors told us. And I was smart enough to record that meeting. So I can provide you with a copy of that 2-hour meeting that Clint and I had with the Special Victims Unit prosecutors 3 or 4 days before they dismissed the charges. Those two gentlemen flew up to Indiana and had a meeting with Clint and I. And in that meeting, they said nothing to us about that 2-hour window being an issue or being a potential issue for dismissing these charges. The entire reason they told us that this case was going to be dismissed and they had already offered Shawn a 30-year plea deal was because of conflicting reports in soil samples between what the state lab had returned in results and what the FBI's soil testing used, which that's a whole other issue.
Yeah, there were like that was one of the issues. There were 3 as far as I read the document. It was the time frame, it was the soil samples, and then it also cites the fact, and maybe you guys have something to say about this, that investigators didn't necessarily vet all of the leads in this case, and that they also did not conduct proper forensic testing when the initial disappearance occurred. So those were the 3 reasons that I read why the case was dismissed.
Yeah, that window to us has never been mentioned. It is fair to state that they'd never vetted all of the leads, but first of all, we did. I mean, any lead that had been presented to law enforcement that they failed to follow up on has most likely been provided to Clint and I over the last 15 years. And we have followed up on all of those. We have interviewed hundreds of witnesses over the years. As a matter of fact, we sent the Rangers to a man who had been incarcerated, who was claiming that he had a cage that Hailey had been held in for several months. And we called the Rangers and he was arrested on a completely different charge. And they went and spent, I believe it was like more than 30 days just hounding this man. And they had him in interrogation and were really digging deep because he was a well-known associate of Shawn Adkins. So we have done our due diligence in following all these leads. What they didn't vet properly was the connections that Shawn had to other people and these stories about this hotel, maybe something taking place down the street at the hotel, another man being with Shawn potentially that day, 2 teenage girls potentially also being involved. Again, this really goes back to the CSAM and that C-City and Mitchell County don't want the secrets of their public officials and cops to be played out in a court of law.
And you talk about vetting leads. There have just been so many rumors surrounding this case that I've heard involving drug trafficking, involving witchcraft, involving all sorts of just crazy, crazy allegations. Now we'll end out the podcast with exactly what you guys think might have happened to Hailey, but were there ever any other leads or rumors that you thought, oh, maybe this one has some teeth to it, maybe this is really what happened to her? Like what have you guys been doing behind the scenes that we don't necessarily know about?
Well, my boss in this case, Mac Sanford, he was my boss. He was the original PI hired by Billie Jean.
Mm-hmm.
And then he submitted some information to the FBI and had to back off the case because of that meeting with the feds. That's when Clint asked me if I would get my license. And so Mac ended up bringing me on. So the original PI hired by Billie Jean then sponsored my Texas license and hired me to take over as Clint's PI. That's how that change of the guard occurred. So I'm trying to remember where we got to answer your question there. Oh, so Mac had originally followed that big lead that blew up in the news, which was the Sonia Callahan letter.
Yes.
And that was the one that took everybody to Odessa.
Victor actually, side note real quick, Victor actually is the recipient of that letter, right, Vic?
Yeah, letter to by her, and I actually went over to Odessa to go investigate a little bit over there.
And Mac initially believed that there was some truth to that, but Clint and Mac and I had several calls about that letter, and we got real specific into the details and the weeds on that. And Mac kept coming up short with he couldn't put his finger on any specific evidence. It was just this rumor from this inmate. And then you saw this guy named Buddy Wayne Webb, who has spent the last 15 years claiming about these tunnels under his house and how Hailey's been held under these
Yeah,
tunnels.
he's very active on Facebook.
Well, he's also a self-reported schizophrenic to me. I've spent hundreds of hours reviewing every moment of his YouTube. I've spoken extensively with the Rangers and the feds about this, and all of those leads have been exhausted. Clint and I, if there was a sighting in Odessa, Clint or I were running over to Odessa with flyers to follow up on it. All of those leads have been exhausted and are well documented from everybody from Billy Sides to John McDaniel, all the way to the feds, to the Rangers. Our Ranger was phenomenal. So there are a lot of leads that the public doesn't know about that were completely exhausted. Shawn wasn't just fingered and for no reason. Everything points back to him and events occurring in that house between midnight and 6 a.m.
I've got this question in my head. I've had it for the last couple of minutes. When did you say y'all believe that Hailey was killed? Between what times?
I believe between 11:59 p.m. and approximately probably 5 a.m.
This is 27th, 28th, right? That night?
No, 26th into the 27th.
Oh, 26th into the
Well-
27th. So, hold up. After you, first of all, what leads you to believe that? And do you think she was murdered there at the house, at Billy's house, or was it another location? And the third part to that question is, do you think her body was taken over to Lake J.B. Thomas immediately after the murder? So there's kind of a three-parter there.
I was just straight up going to ask, what do you think happened exactly? What's your timeline? What happened to Hailey? What have you decided?
I think that David was intentionally set out of the house that night. If we follow the witchcraft lead, and I hate to get real ugly about this, but December 26th is known in the pagan holiday as something called Feast of the Children. It is when a virgin child is sacrificed, usually a female. It involves a celebratory dinner of all of the child's favorite meal or favorite foods called the Last Supper. And if you go to Billie Jean's earliest interviews with the press and with Nancy Grace, you hear her refer to that dinner as the Last Supper. She says, Hailey came back home. I made all of her favorite foods that night. We had the Last Supper. And the minute I heard that, my blood ran cold. And that's when I started looking at this in a very different light. Then I discovered that a pentagram rug had been seized from the house. And this is the part where I'd like to turn it over to Clint, because we then discovered that this witchcraft book had been dumped into a dumpster. Billie Jean had given it to a friend, put it in a dumpster, and told that friend to lie to the FBI if they came asking questions about that book.
Clint, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, because out of all the rumors we have heard, this would be the last one that I thought that y'all were going to go with.
Well, the book is absolutely true. Billie Jean had a witchcraft book, and she brought it over to her friend Vicky's house. This was like day 3, day 4. Maybe after Hailey is reported missing.
Okay.
So that like on the 30th, 31st. And I go over to Vicky's house because my best friend lives there too. Ray lives there. And Ray says, "Hey man, I gotta tell you something." I'm like, "Well," he's like, "Man, Vicky, I swore to Vicky I wouldn't tell you, but Billie Jean just came over here and asked Vicky to hide this book, or destroy it, throw it away or something, and don't say anything about it." And I promised to her that I wouldn't say anything, but man, I gotta tell you, you're my friend. I'm like, "What book? What are you talking about?" He's like, "It's some kind of witchcraft book." I'm like, "What?" And so I immediately called the FBI. The FBI were there in town at this time. And they came over there, talked to Vicky. They got the book. They talked to Floyd. They talked to me. And that is the last I've heard about that. I've asked about this several times. Nobody else seems to want to ask about this. I've asked about this. You know, nobody wants to ask Billie Jean about this. Nobody wants to ask Raymond Floyd. Nobody wants to ask Vicky Espinoza. Nobody wants to ask these questions to them. Hey, what about this book? Is this true? And there should be some significance in that, because that's she was hiding evidence.
And going on with this witchcraft theory, Hailey was killed by blunt force trauma to the head. How do you think that cause of death fits what happened to Hailey regarding the witchcraft and the Last Supper and this rite that you guys are talking about? What do you think conspired that exactly led to her death?
Well, that's not a fact there. She was hit in the head. That's what they think. That's a theory. Because that could have happened from the body being dumped. You understand? Whenever they found this body, there was no skin on it. There was no flesh left. There wasn't no.
And it actually wasn't even complete, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, it was bones.
And it did
They
say
didn't-
at or
there
near
wasn't
the time of
anything
death,
else.
so that does check out, yes.
So the head injury, that could have happened when they dumped the body.
And again,
That could
real
have
quick,
happened.
do you think that happened immediately after her death? Do you think the body was moved there, or do you think she was dumped there after and there she stayed?
I think she was dumped there that morning, the 28th.
27th.
The 27th.
27th.
She was dumped there that morning.
And if not blunt force
that's why
trauma,
Shawn-
then
That's
what
why
killed her?
the pings on Shawn's cell phone matches up to that the exact spot.
Ask that question again, Erica.
If not the blunt force trauma, then what do you think led to Hailey's death?
I have no idea.
We are coming up to
Nobody really has no idea. That is just a theory. You know, my theory.
Yeah.
I think that Shawn choked her out and choked her to death, like I did to him. I think that he is sadistic, and that's what he did.
Erica Morse, Clint Dunn, thank you for joining us on this podcast. We may have to do it again. There's still so much more to talk about.
Well, we're going to have to do this. I mean, you guys, this is not even the tip of the iceberg.
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
There's a lot to go with this. And somebody has to start asking these questions. Somebody needs to ask Billie Jean these questions. Somebody needs to ask David these questions. David needs to be part of this. He loved his sister. All the people that loved Hailey need to say something. They need to ask these questions. They need to be loud.
Do you still have contact with David?
Do what?
Do you still have contact with David?
Haven't contact. No, we could quit talking in 2017 after I started pressing him to say something.
And you should know that we did reach out to Billie to ask her if she wanted to be a part of this. She declined. John Young, you know him. We reached out to him. We will be talking to him as well. I went to Shawn Adkins' parents' house in Big Spring, knocked on that door. There was no answer. However, when I did walk up there, the blinds were open. I left for 15 minutes, came back. All the blinds were shut down, and I did leave my number. I never did hear back from them. But again, we'll have to do this again. We're just out of time. Thank you guys for taking the time to talk to us. I'm Victor Sotelo for Adam Singleton and Erica Garner. Thank you again for being here.